Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Tim Burkett, who's here to share with us his new book, Enlightenment Is an Accident: Ancient Wisdom and Simple Practices to Make You Accident Prone. So Tim has been practicing Zen Buddhism in San Francisco since 1964. He is a psychologist and the guiding teacher of Minnesota Zen Meditation Center. So let's welcome to the show, Tim Burkett.
I'm so happy to be here, Marianne. Thank you for having me.
What an honor it is to have you here to talk about this book. So I've got to ask, what inspired you to write this?
Well, I've been teaching meditation for years and years and years, and I have so many students who are always trying to get enlightened. And I just wanted to kind of give them a path to enlightenment, which really is about living more lightly, not being caught by all these worries and fears that we have. So that's why I wrote the book.
It seems that when people are on their spiritual path, enlightenment is like the holy grail that people tend to look for. Is there a way that people who are on this journey can find their own path to enlightenment and leave kind of any of those thought processes behind and disappointment behind if they don't reach it by a certain time or what have you?
Well, in my book, I talk about the path to enlightenment as it being like a line. We go from here to there. We start at the beginning. I started many, many years ago when I was young, and we take the path. But the path is also, since meditation is about being present wherever we are, it's also about a series of dots. And that means really giving ourselves to whatever our spiritual practice is and trying to do it beyond just sitting in a chair, the dot, moment to moment. So that means an aspiration without an expectation. As soon as oh, I want to get this enlightenment, it turns into an expectation. We're no longer doing dot practice, meaning we're no longer here present. We're trying to get something else. And really, it's about coming back and just being here, being with whatever goes on in a non-judgmental, open, and ultimately loving way, whatever goes on. And that, if we do that practice over and over again, and I talk about lots of different ways to do that in the book, we find that we're living more lightly. And it's an accident because as long as we're expecting to live more lightly, we're not gonna. We may temporarily, but not long term.
In your book, you talk about our original face. What does that mean?
Well, I teach, and I know, I could say I believe, but I know that there is a stillness inside before we think. Beneath our thinking, surrounding our thinking, there's a wonderful stillness. What T.S. Eliot, who was not a Buddhist at all, called the still point of the turning world. What Jesus, who was not a Buddhist at all, called the peace that passes understanding. It passes our concepts by because it's bigger than our concepts. And only when we do different spiritual practices that help us open up to this will we return to our original face before we get caught by our images of how we should be, how we've been, how we might have been, how we could have been, regretting, rehearsing, on and on.
I can see how that can become a cycle because it seems so often we have these different roles that we put on ourselves as we play throughout our lifetimes. It could be good employee, parents, it goes on from there. So how does someone get to a point where they can leave those masks kind of in a way behind so that they can just be true and honest with themselves?
Well, I have 5 chapters on that. And in the first section of my book is the settling in phase. So settling into doing a spiritual practice. And I talk about the importance of having a mentor or a teacher and and I talk about some other things. But then in the second phase, which I call the stumbling toward enlightenment phase, the hard work phase, I talk about uh, portals, and I can, I don't know how much time we have. I talk about something from Buddhism, bringing the aggregates into view, seeing the hindrances, our craving, greed, our restlessness, our worry, our lethargy, our boredom, our doubt, our hatred, our anger, and whatever, looking closely at them, feeling the connected feeling, recognizing how it intensifies, what thoughts, sensations come up, and openly accepting it. And that's one of the portals. Another portal is using a mantra or gatha or a mala, which I talk about in the book at some length. And then, of course, the fourth portal is seated meditation, which I also talk about in the book. And the fifth portal is immersion in nature. Nature is a wonderful salve for us. If we can just spend time in nature without our headphones on, without trying to get anything, just being present. I grew up in California, and we used to go out up into the Sierras every year in the summer. And my father would take John Muir. He's a naturalist who lived at the beginning of the 20th century. And charted all the mountains and trails in the Sierras. He has a phrase, between any two pine trees, there is a door leading to a new way of life. A new way of life in which our chattering, our trying to figure things out, our getting caught by our worries and fears just drops away. Between any two pine trees. I remember this from when I was a kid. But between any two pine trees, there is a door leading to a new way of life. My father wasn't spiritual, and he wasn't into meditation, but he didn't know that because he was into being in nature with us, and without any headphones or any iPhones or any electronic stuff, which we didn't have back then. That's the fifth one, immersion in nature. The thrift. So I have a chapter on each of those. Again, I have a chapter on bring the things that hinder us, that we get caught by, into view in a kind, open way. And then another is a purely Buddhist, bringing the five aggregates into view. And then a third is the mantras, gathas, and malas. Mantras are something we repeat to ourselves. And it can be one of these sacred mantras from India, or it can be something pretty simple, like when I had Lyme's disease and I had trouble getting out of bed, but I could get out of bed just to drive my car to the lake, which is 3 miles away. I would just repeat to myself when I got there, Bide Makaska, that's the name of the lake, Bide Makaska, looking, seeing stillness, feeling stillness. And that became my own mantra or gatha. And then after a while, I did it every day. After a while, I would drive to the lake, and I would be there on a bench for maybe half an hour because I couldn't really meditate in the formal way. And I would just look at the lake and breathe, looking, seeing nature, peace. Looking, seeing nature, peace. And that helped me with my Lyme's disease, which seemed like it would never end.
Well, what a gift that is. And I know many people have a spiritual experience anytime they do walk the John Muir Trail.
Oh, yeah, we know about John Muir.
In your book, you talk about spiritual bypassing. I'd love for you to share about what that is for our listeners.
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, so many people who get involved in a path toward enlightenment, any kind of spiritual path, and I think even Christians, Christians too, very much so, they do spiritual bypassing. And what do I mean by that? I mean that they want to just go past the broken places, go past the vulnerable places, But those are tools to help us become accident prone. I say in my book, many spiritual and religious organizations completely ignore the darker elements. The fear body, which buries these negative emotions deep inside of us. The more we get on a spiritual path, the more we want to bypass those. And yet, those are the entryways. Those are the doors. I say the shadow self, which includes repressed ideas, instincts, impulses, weaknesses, desires, perversions, traumatic memories, embarrassments. That if we can just be with those, admit having them. Often, if we're spiritually bypassing, we're really on this path, we're really doing well. I got through this retreat, I'm doing another retreat, and we just want to push that stuff aside. And then it comes back and gets us. It may not get us during a retreat, but it'll get us at some other time because it's our shadow side, and we all have it. All have it. Dogen, the Zen teacher, has this phrase, all being Buddha nature. That means whole being Buddha nature, actually, is the phrase. That our whole being is where that stillness is. That deep stillness, that original face is our whole being before we segment things and wall them off. And it's a rediscovery of that, this spiritual journey, rediscovery of that, what my teacher called beginner's mind. In the beginner's mind, there are many opportunities. In the expert's mind, there are few.
In the shadow part of ourselves, is there something there that we really need to learn or something that will help us on our path?
Well, we need to learn that we can handle these different shadows, that we can just handle these different negative emotions and be with them and breathe through them, recognize and accept them. And when they get too much, then we need to do some kind of meditative approach where we're not flooded by them. Because if we're flooded by them, that's not so good. So when I did the meditation by our lake, which is actually a gatha rather than a mantra that I made up myself, I was flooded with despair. And just being flooded by despair didn't help, but having something I could recognize the despair, I could accept the despair, but I was flooded by it. So the mantra, just repeating something to myself that had meaning and depth to me and brought me back, helped me. Because I wasn't in those days, those few days when I was really ill, wasn't really ready to open up to my shadow. So it's good to have a teacher or a mentor to help you know when to do. In the Eastern tradition, there are two primary forms of meditation. One is focused meditation, when we don't open up to our shadow, when we just focus on something, and what I call bare awareness meditation, where we really open up to it. But it's wonderful to be able to move back and forth between those two and not overdo the bare awareness, because then we can get flooded by our shadow.
I think a lot of times when people go through difficult times, they feel like they're the only one. And in your book, you say life hurts all of us and we all carry old wounds. And
Yep.
isn't that the truth?
Isn't that the truth? See, people think because, technically I'm a Zen master and I've been head of this Zen center for years and years. They think I don't have old wounds, I don't bleed still. Jeez, what a projection. I want to say to anybody who's listening, if you have some guru or some teacher who doesn't admit their old wounds, usually they're doing spiritual bypassing themselves. Usually.
You gotta watch out for those.
They're caught by the role as a teacher. Wow, I'm a teacher now. Everybody's liking me. I'm not going to show anybody my shadow. But a good teacher is still willing to see and feel his or her or their hurt places from a long, long time ago that are right here, because we carry around this fear body and these wounds for our whole lives until we die. But they heal through this practice of meditation. But it doesn't mean they're still not there. So something can happen, they can crack open at any time.
Does that just give the people who are practicing on the mat or meditating the opportunity then to go deeper into that topic, kind of peeling it back like a onion in many ways?
I hope so. I hope so. I call that in my book, again, I'm using a Buddhist term, uh, 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 letting the skins uh, of the naga, of the serpent. Buddha was supposedly protected by a serpent before he had his enlightenment experience. And the serpent becomes very important in Buddhism and in Zen. The serpent shows us how to shed our skins, our worries and fears, our beliefs. And in Buddhism, there's not a guy named Nagarjuna, who's the skin shedding hero. He's called the serpent hero. So we shed those layers of protection. We become more sensitized as we open up to our shadow, more alive, more able to be in the moment. But we don't peel them away too fast, because if we do, we feel raw. So we let the meditation practice, whatever it is, doesn't matter what it is, just begin to let those skins fall away as we feel more in the moment, more willing to be vulnerable and alive right now, right? And then ultimately we're able to live so much more lightly when we shed 8 or 10 of those skins. But it takes a while. It takes commitment. It takes not overdoing it, not peeling them away so fast that we just go, yikes, help, help.
Oh, that sounds painful. That sounds painful. In your book, you mentioned about portals and you brought it up earlier. I'd love for you to share that with our listeners.
Okay, well, I talk about 5 specific kinds of portals: craving and greed, restlessness and worry, lethargy and boredom, doubt, anger, aversion, and hatred. And I have to say, during the pandemic, uh, many of my students have had, they always had craving and greed. They always have anger, aversion, and hatred. But during the pandemic, lethargy and boredom and doubt, and lethargy and boredom really means depression. I'm also a psychologist. I don't know if you introduced me that way. I can't remember, Marianne. But lethargy and boredom, we feel, I can't do this. This is hopeless. I have no energy. But if we can look closely at that, and the feeling that comes up when we're just exhausted, even though we've just woken up in the morning after 8 hours of sleep, recognizing how it intensifies, what thoughts we have about, I can't do this, what the sensations are in our body, we can begin to open up to it so that we live more lightly. And both as a Zen teacher and a psychologist, I teach people that other than meds, with depression, and again, so many people have had depression during the pandemic, and still post-pandemic. So many meditative people have had it. The other thing is just to do something. You don't feel like doing something, but you do something. I didn't feel like going to the lake and repeating that mantra, but I went to the lake. I went to the lake and I did it, and I felt better. But I had to really force myself because I was so kind of down. So looking closely at the hindrance, whatever it is, the lethargy and boredom, the doubt, the aversion, the anger, and the hatred, and recognizing how it intensifies, how it stays the same, what thoughts, feelings, sensations come up. And so we are tracing it toward its root, but not just intellectually, with our psyche, with our body, mind. It's a meditative experience.
So when we talk about the Zen practice of meditation, what is that? How is that different from just going out and meditating?
Well, I'm eclectic. I don't know if it's coming from California, but I'm going to say it's coming from California and being raised as a Unitarian. I'm eclectic. So There is a formal way of doing meditation in Zen, which I certainly teach, but I teach a complement of approaches, and I talk about them in this book. Um, uh, Basically, they are focused meditation. You focus on whatever you like to, on your breathing, on counting your breathing, on repeating something yourself with your breathing, on the sensations in your body. And if you work with a spiritual mentor, as I do with many of my students online and in person, and many other teachers do all over the country, you kind of are able to calibrate with your teacher what sort of focused meditation you should do, especially if you're flooded by negative emotions. The second one is bare awareness, and that's when we're just doing the recognition of whatever the feeling is, recognition of the fear, acceptance of it, breathing through it and feeling it where it is in my body. Oh, right now it's around my heart. Oh, can I just breathe into that and be with that non-judgmentally and compassionately? So that's called bare awareness meditation. And of course, in common vernacular in the United States, that's called mindfulness meditation. Well, that's fine, but I want to be a little more specific, so I call it bare awareness meditation. That's the second type of meditation, and they're wonderful complements to each other. The third type is what my Zen teacher, my Japanese Zen teacher, called just do stupid zazen. And so this sounds weird, but what he meant was just do it. Just put yourself down on the chair or the cushion and be present for 20 minutes every day with no iPhones, no earphones, no radio, no TV, present with your body, with your breathing, with your psyche. Stupid, meaning don't evaluate, don't judge, don't try to go anywhere. And if you do any of these three, or all of these three, you're doing a wonderful preparation for enlightenment, which can be a wonderfully big experience where you die completely to yourself, to your small self, and open up to something vast that's always supporting you. Your what I call your original face, which is the face of the universe, supporting you. Or you can have just a lot of many little experiences of feeling lighter, letting go of Tim Burkett and who he needs to be, and that he's a good teacher or a bad teacher, and just being present with Marianne, just having a good time being present with Marianne, even though I only see her two-dimensionally.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Tim Burkett in regards to his new book, Enlightenment Is an Accident. We'll be right back after these messages.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed, and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
The book Terminal Cancer is a Misdiagnosis, authored by Danny Carroll, is on sale at Amazon now. Licensed psychologist and psychotherapist Tessa Antia-John-Guerra commented, "This is one of the most empowering books on a topic of cancer you will ever read." Award-winning author T.L. Needham commented, "This recommended book can be understood by anyone seeking answers, hope, and alternatives to a terminal diagnosis. Buy it now on Amazon.com.
Are you feeling disconnected from your life and your body as a woman? Do you feel numb emotionally and/or sexually and just not sure how to feel really alive again, or maybe for the first time? Are you struggling with body and self-acceptance, especially during menopause? If you'd like to reclaim your feminine and learn more about woman and gynecology and how it can help empower your life, contact Gina Cloud at www.ginacloud.com.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guest Tim Burkett, who's sharing his book, Enlightenment Is an Accident. What a gift it is that we get to spend this time together, be present, and maybe learn something new. It seems we're coming full circle in our discussion here. Earlier, you talked about nature and how that had such a huge impact on you. And I love how in your book you talk about your first spiritual teacher as being John Muir.
Yes, he definitely was. But I didn't know it. I was just a kid. So my father took us into the Sierras every summer. And he carried the little John Muir book, which was a green book, with him. And one of the things I liked about the book, I talk about this, I think, in my book, I'm not sure, was that it had maps. So I had a map to follow. I had a path. And if I got lost or got confused, I could just look on page 34, and it showed me I had a half a mile to go to get to someplace and a half mile to go to get to another. That helped me. Focus meditation is like a map. You have a mantra, you have your breath, you have something you say to yourself to help you just come back to being present in your body, in your mind. And so he had these maps, and I'm using the term map figuratively. Although he actually did have lines in his little book, but they were not very sophisticatedly done because he was the first one to chart the Sierras, and they helped me a lot. But then I think I do talk about this in the book. When I was just a pretty young kid, like only 9 or 10, my parents decided that we would climb Mount Langley, which is right next to Mount Whitney in California. I don't know if you know the Sierras. You know the Sierras, Marianne?
I sure do.
Oh, yeah. So Langley is actually a harder hike than Whitney, Whitney is the highest peak in the continental United States. Langley is also 14,000 feet. So we set out one day before dawn from Golden Trout Camp, and I had my John Muir book with me. My dad carried it, but he let me hold on to it because it was kind of my support during that time because it was hard. And that, again, that's having a teacher is so supportive, having a group of people to meditate with is so supportive, or having something to hold. Malas are something we can hold. Anyway, that was my mala. And but then we got to Timberline after traveling for it seemed like a whole day, although I think it was only about noon. And all of a sudden, there was no map. All of a sudden, John Muir didn't say anything. And I lost my map. And so without my map, without my something to focus on, a mantra or my breathing or some guidance from some spiritual teaching, I was mapless, except my mother was like my Zen teacher, my spiritual teacher. She didn't know it, but she walked ahead of me above Timberline. I was scared. There were no markers. There were no labels. There was nothing I could depend on. The path was not there. And yet my mother was there 30 feet ahead of me, walking. And finally, I gave up. And I had a 9-year-old enlightenment experience, whatever you think about that. Meaning I just gave up and I just walked. And I just felt the joy of walking. And then we were at the top. And I just was flooded with joy, flooded with happiness. which came from giving up my map. And so I was doing bare awareness meditation, and I didn't even know, which is the best kind, because I just was completely in the present. And so I opened up to the vast panorama, including Whitney and Langley and peaks all over the place. And then my mother said, "Oh, I bet you're the youngest kid to do this. You should sign your name in the book." There was a book at the time. And I just laughed, because who cared about youngest and oldness or signing a book or not signing a book? When we open up beyond the limitations of our thinking, we're just safe and protected wherever we are. And so we don't need, we can sign a book or not sign a book. Who cares? We're just enjoying living.
What a great lesson at such an early age.
Yeah, it helped me much later when I was having trouble meditating. These long retreats I used to go to, so much trouble meditating. And just that memory helped me a lot. Emotional memory can help us a lot, but it can also get in our way. But when we can draw on positive emotional memories, that's wonderful to help us on the path.
You had mentioned that the book for you was a mala. And so when people are looking to incorporate that within their own practice, what do you suggest?
Let's assume that your audience doesn't know what a mala is. A mala is prayer beads within the Buddhist tradition. And there is a large mala, which is 108 beads, and you usually wrap them around your wrist, or a small one, which is 26 beads. And a mala is something tactile we can use to ground ourselves in being present and not being caught. And so malas are used in conjunction with mantras or gathas. Gathas are situational phrases that we repeat to ourselves, like I might here I am in my computer room, and I might say, when I open my computer, I feel wonderful joy. And every time I open my computer, I say that. People don't usually feel that way, but that's the gatha that helps you. A mantra is something more general that you do over long periods of time. Anyway, I was in Bhutan years ago as a Zen priest, and I hung out a lot with the monks and the nuns, and they were always working their malas, meaning they were always saying something to themselves as they did one bead and then another, and turning them and doing another. And that helped them be meditative. That helped them be alive, because they had the word, they had the tactile feeling, and that helped them come back to just being present, And the old monks in Bhutan, their malas were just worn down completely, but who cares if it's worn down? They were still there. They did the long version. They did the 108 beads. But it's good to have a phrase to use. My first mantra was what my teacher gave me many, many years ago when I was having a really hard time in a retreat, in a Zen retreat, which is gone, gone, gone beyond, gone completely beyond. And that's part of a chant that we used to chant at our Zen center. We still do. And it helped me be gone beyond all of this garbage that we carry around. But doesn't mean we should transcend it, but we're going beyond its limitations, and the garbage becomes compost that enriches us. So I had that mantra that my teacher gave me years ago, the gone, gone, gone beyond, gone completely beyond. It really helped me for all the retreats I did for that year and two, because anytime I would feel overwhelmed or, I can't do this, I would just repeat it to myself. So I recommend that your audience find their own mantra, find their own gatha, and use a mala. Use a tactile support of a mala. You can get them. They're all over the place, especially in California.
In your book, you share about dualism and non-dualism, and I think sometimes the definitions of those can get confusing, especially if someone's a beginner on the path or even if someone's been on it for a little while. And I'd love for you to share with our listeners what that is.
Yeah. Well, uh, and everybody wants non-dualism if they're already on the path. We want to feel interdependent and interconnected with all of life. We want to feel that we are one with all of life. Oh, that's what the great spiritual teachers do. They're all one with life. That's non-dualism, and I teach a lot about that. That's beautiful. But it's also true that this is Tim talking here to Marianne, and there's a screen. So that's dualism. And dualism isn't bad, it's good. My teacher used to say we have dualistic practices with a non-dualistic attitude. That means we do these different practices without trying to evaluate and judge how we're doing, because the inner critic just takes over and wants to evaluate and judge. We just do them. They're dualistic practices. Sometimes I do a mantra. Sometimes I do bare awareness. Sometimes I do just stupid meditation. That's dualistic. Those are different paths, but they're all part of the same interdependent flow of life. And if we don't analyze them and just do them, we begin to feel non-dualist acceptance of whatever is and feel part of it. So the more we do non-dualistic practices with a dualistic attitude, the more the individual Tim, who's just authentically himself and separate from everything, is authentic, and yet he feels connected to everything. The more we feel authentically ourselves, the more we have this wonderful connection. The more we feel connected to everything and everyone, the more authentic we can be. We don't have to fake it anymore, because we're already supported by everyone and everything. That's our original face. But again, that's a Buddhist. If that term sounds so too technical, just get rid of it. But that's what I experienced in my own little 9-year-old way when I was at the top of the mountain.
Well, it's clear that you've been meant to do what you're doing. And thank goodness for that, because these books that you've written are just so impressive. And one of the things you talk about is cultivating the empty field.
Yeah.
So what is that, and why would we cultivate it?
Yes. Well, let's go back to dualism and non-dualism. The field is empty in the Buddhist sense, but empty in Buddhism is synonymous with inner being or interdependence. So that emptiness, that stillness in which we're not caught by anything or anyone, we have to cultivate to enrich it and bring it alive. Meaning, I do my daily meditation, I work with my mantra, I do other spiritual things to bring that empty field alive in my life. Even though it's empty, it's full of life. We say in Zen, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. So within that stillness, that great spaciousness, if we cultivate, if we open up to it by digging in the soil, we grow wonderful plants, but we don't grow them. They grow themselves. So that empty field has the potential for richness of all the plants and animals to come from it. So that's cultivating the empty field. And actually, that's what I've been doing. I don't say that I've done it perfectly for many, many years. And what I encourage maybe your listeners are all doing that too. That's cool. Just keep it up, you guys. Just keep it up.
Well, thank you. And also in your book, you talk about just if we stay stuck in our limitations, how does that affect us? And is there a way that we can move beyond those limitations?
Yes, we get stuck in our limitations. And as a psychologist, I've also studied and talked about neurological freezing or neurological plasticity, meaning there's something called neuroplasticity that the researchers have been studying since the beginning of the 21st century. And of course, my teachers knew about it before it had ever been studied, and their teachers did too, because it's what happens. We become more resilient. But the older we get, usually the more limited we feel, the more limitations we have, the more caught we are by our habits, the more we depend on our habits, and the more less present we are. You know how older people tend to be kind of always in the past, and that hardens our neurons, and our neuron patterns become hardened and hardened and hardened until we die. And those neuron patterns have, each of those has different habits, forms of habits, which are limitations, which limit us from just being alive, just really enjoying our life without being caught by either our habits or our worries and fears. So neuroplasticity is about moving beyond these limitations by softening them by doing two things. One is doing different types of meditative exercises, like I talk in the book about the 5 different kinds, or taking on challenging things that get us out of our routines, out of our habitual routine. Just if we taking up a foreign language, not one you already know, but a new one, that brain science is really clear that also helps you return to the natural plasticity of your original face, what we call beginner's mind, open mind, loving mind in Zen.
What would you like our readers and listeners to take away from Enlightenment Is an Accident?
First of all, you can do it. If I did it, you can do it. I'm no big deal. I just put in my hours. The second thing is it takes commitment and time and effort. And probably you need to find a single teacher and work with that teacher, or a single mentor, if not a teacher, and work with that mentor to give you support. Someone who's been there and done that, which I do here at our Zen Center. And I do this online with people. But there are many people, especially in California, who do this. But you need to feel your way along and find a teacher who you resonate with. And the other thing is you need some phrases or books or something to support you. Some paragraph in a book. I mean, John Muir supported me when I was a kid. I didn't even know anything about religion, but he supported me with his beautiful phrases like, between any 2 pines, there is a new way of life. That really helped me, and it still helps me when I get full of little Tim and all of his worries and concerns. The third thing is we need to not feel isolated and alone. We need to have, in Buddhism, we call this a sangha, but we need to have friends who are also on a spiritual path who we can get help from and give support to. I think if we have both a mentor and some book or readings that we do, and friends, there's 2 or 3 that we do this with, and we keep to the practice. We don't change the spiritual practice too often, because if we do too much supermarket shopping, we'll never do the practice. But you get to do this some, just not too much. Then you're preparing yourself to have this wonderful accident of enlightenment, which can be, like as I said earlier, a huge experience, or it can be just falling into living more lightly, more joyfully, not so caught by tomorrow and yesterday, and just happy and content wherever you are, regardless of what's happening.
So, Tim, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community? And I understand you have some meditation that are online that people can join as well.
Yes, we have. If they go to Minnesota Zen Meditation Center, that we have talks. Some of my talks are on YouTube. I'm not the guiding teacher anymore. I've stepped down, but there's still some of my talks there. There are some classes online. We have retreats online. And then we mentor people online too. I started this mentor program here at Zen Center about 8 years ago because I felt people needed the one-to-one contact. When I was a young man, there wasn't much, people weren't interested in meditation. So my first teacher, Suzuki, I had access to him whenever I wanted him, not in a big group, but just privately, and it helped me a whole bunch. So people can go onto our site, Minnesota Zen Meditation Center, and do any one of a number of things. And if they want to meet with me online, one-to-one, all they have to do is contact the center. We have an administrator, and I meet with people, usually once in a preliminary way, and then they decide we decide if I should continue.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
You're very welcome, Marianne.
Well, thank you, Tim. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Enlightenment Is an Accident: Ancient Wisdom and Simple Practices to Make You Accident Prone. Enlightenment Is an Accident is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And remember, support our indie bookstores. If you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. You can also purchase this book directly from the publisher, Shambhala Publishing, at shambhala.com. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.